guys, it's Ollie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Am I wearing the same clothes as last week's video? Yes. Am I filming these the exact same time? Yes. I just got done with the other one. Anyway, so for this video, I kind of decided to put in some beginner mistakes that are commonly made by snail keepers. I'm probably going to find a better way to phrase that for the title of this video, but that's the general point. I asked on a couple of Facebook groups, which I'll link down in the description below, as well as my Instagram, also linked in the description below, for beginner mistakes they see often in the snail community. I have definitely done some of these. There is no judgment if you have ever done any of these. If you currently do one of these and you're like, oh dang, I've been messing up, it's okay, just change it. It's alright. For a disclaimer for this video, I am in no means an expert. Always seek more than one opinions when you're trying to research an animal. Last disclaimer, I promise, this video is intended for garden snails. I have no experience with giant African land snails. I have very little experience with aquatic snails. So let's go ahead and get right into the video with topic number 1, egg searches. So there are some mistakes that people make with egg searching when they first get their snails. One is just not searching for eggs. You definitely need to search for eggs. Even if you are planning on breeding your snails, you still should incubate them in a separate enclosure. It's just safer all around. Another thing that they do is they don't look regularly. So I actually recommend, especially around breeding time, to check once a week. I check once a week. It's their protein day. I make a routine out of it. Just search every week, even, just to make sure you're not missing any. That might be excessive. I don't know. Another one is that they don't look deep enough into the substrate. So when you are searching for snails, you want to go deep into it. So you're going to want to look all the way into the substrate to make sure you don't miss anything. Honestly, it's good for the snail's environment to turn the substrate anyways. So I just turn the substrate whenever I look for them once a week. And as you're turning it, you're getting all the way to the bottom. Obviously, if you are looking for eggs and you're not going to be culling them or anything, you might want to be a little careful with that. But that way you get all of the substrate looked through and sorted out. The other thing is not looking just because you have one snail. This is not true for every snail. However, some snails are self-fertilizing and some snails can retain sperm. So unless you know 100% that your species of snails cannot do either of those things, you should be checking for eggs. Alright, and topic number 2 is food. So here are some issues that I see a lot with feeding in the snail community. A lot of people get snails and they think they can just throw some lettuce in there and that's all they need to eat and they're good to go, and that is not the case. They have to have different things to eat. Different vegetables, different fruits, different proteins provide different nutrients. So you want to make sure that you are giving them a decent variety of food. As well as protein, which brings me to the second kind of subtopic of this, which is that snails mostly, unless they are strict herbivores, need protein. I have a video all about protein that I will put in whichever corner it goes to. Go check that out if you're confused on protein. I put calcium under the food category because it seemed fitting enough. So a mistake I see beginner snail keepers make is either not giving calcium or giving it incorrectly. They need calcium to build their shells. They need calcium. They need a constant source of calcium. They will normally self-regulate themselves. It's not a big concern. You can put cuttlefish bones. You can find it in the bird section at any pet store. Put it to the side that's softer up. So when you get your cuttle bone, I don't have any, so I'm like on hand, so I'm just using my hand. So if you have your calcium, there's a hard end and a soft end, and you can tell by putting your fingernail. And if your fingernail sinks into it, it's the soft end. If it can't sink into it, it's the hard end. You want the soft end facing up so the snails can easily eat it. So the other thing that I see people do is sprinkling calcium on their food like you would for a lizard. And that is not, don't do that. Because as vital as calcium is for snails, snails can also overdose on calcium. So you don't want to sprinkle it onto their food because they're going to eat it because they need the food. Even if they don't need the calcium on the food, they're probably still going to eat it. I highly recommend, unless it is a very special case where you might need to do that regulated, don't sprinkle calcium on their food. Alright, I'm moving right along to issue number 3 is legal stuff. A lot of new snail keepers don't know legality stuff around. I know I didn't. So one of the big legal things if you are in the US is the topic of gals, or giant African land snails. They are illegal here in the US. Don't get one. It's a whole thing. If you are in the US, you cannot have a giant African land snail. The closest you can get is a garden snail. Pomadias and asperges are the biggest ones you can get, if that helps. The other one that a lot of people don't know about is don't get your snails across state lines. It is illegal for most species to cross state lines. You can definitely look into it. Feel free to call your DNR if you are wanting one, but you don't know if you can pass state lines. You can call your DNR and they can probably explain it to you a little bit better based on your own thing. Now, one thing about snails that's not illegal is that you are free to wild catch them. Double check your state laws, but I think it's like everywhere. You can go outside and collect snails as long as they are garden snails, especially if they're invasive. They're like least concern. They're considered pests. Easiest way to get them is to find a gardener local to you and ask if you can come check their plants for some snails. However, just because you can get them from outside does not mean you can release snails into the wild. That's a big legality thing that I do see a lot of keepers make. So when you can't release snails, it's if they are laid in captivity, so even if they're still just eggs, don't release them outside. They're born in captivity, they should not be released outside. It's a legality thing, it's also an ethical thing. It's not good for the environment, don't do it. This includes eggs, babies, or snails that you've just kept for too long, even if they're from outside. Or any snail that's even an adult that was captive bred. You cannot release those outside. You should not release those outside. If you've had like a snail for maybe even a week, you can put it back outside if you really want to, as long as you got it from outside. And put it where you found it. Don't cross cities or states or anything. Just leave it where you found it, kind of thing, you know? So that's a lot of the legality stuff. A lot of people don't seem to know about legality for the same reason that it's just not talked about a lot. But it's something that is very, very important for the snail community. So putting that out there. Topic number 4 is handling. So when you handle a snail, if you choose to handle a snail, you want to make sure that your hands are clean or that you are wearing gloves. So some of the salts and things on our skin can be harmful to snails. It's safer to just wear a glove. At least try to rinse off your hands really, really well with just plain water. The other one for handling that I've seen a lot and that a lot of people were concerned about, seeing beginners pick up snails incorrectly. So I'm going to be using my little friend here that sits on my sign to show you. So when you pick up a snail, a lot of people will pick them up by the shell, even if they are out like this, and they'll pick them up by the shell, and that's how they pick them up. Don't do this. This will put a lot of strain on that shell. Picking them up like this can cause mantle collapse, which is basically where they come out of their shell, and euthanasia is almost always recommended with those cases. I have a video about mantle collapse if you're worried about it or want to learn about it, but yeah, that is one of the possible causes of it. It also is just not good for your snail. So the way that you want to pick them up if they are outside of their shell and you still need to pick them up is you just kind of get here and tickle. The foot is this piece here. This is the foot. So you're going to want to kind of tickle it a little bit, and they will normally retract back into their shell, and then you can pick them up safely. As long as they are not suctioned, you don't want to pull them up to unsuction them. You don't want to have them and just slide them off of something. That's also very bad for them. So yeah, to pick them up, just tickle their foot and they should release their suction and you can pick them up. I think it is also worth mentioning that still don't hold them like this either. You want to kind of support their body. So, all right, and now on to point number 5, is you don't want any harmful things in the enclosure. So a lot of beginner mistakes involve enclosures, such as having hard things in the enclosure like rocks or like little fake houses that are hard. The reason for this is that the snail might climb up high on the enclosure, fall onto that hard object, and damage their shell, sometimes beyond repair. So you don't want anything hard in the enclosure. If you do, and you really, really don't want to get rid of it, you can always put some moss on top of it. I've heard that really helps, and that then they fall in the moss and it's softer. Another thing in the enclosure you don't want is you don't want to heat the enclosure from the bottom. So you don't want to heat it from the bottom because when snails get hot, they will typically bury down into the substrate to cool off. So that being said, you don't want the heat coming from below. If you want to use a heat mat, I recommend putting it on the side where it's not interacting with the substrate. I'm also going to point this out because I talked about a heat mat. Always, always, always use a thermostat and regulate your heat sources. And the last thing on that is anything you bring in from outside, like sticks or leaf litter, need to be cleaned correctly. I do have my own video on how to do that. There's also tons of other videos on how to do that. I don't really recommend the bleach method, but there's other methods you can do it with. Just make sure anything that you get from outside is clean as well as possible so that you don't have any parasites or any unwanted guests in your enclosure. Alright, and with that, we are all done with today's video. Those are 5 things that beginners makes with snail keeping. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helped or it was at least entertaining. Thank you so much to everyone on the Facebook groups and on Instagram for helping me come up with some of these. I really, really appreciate it. Don't forget to give this video a like for the algorithm, comment down below if you have any more to add, and subscribe to my channel if you're into this kind of content or really any animal kind of content. I upload every single Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but you can hit the bell if you don't want to remember that. And as always, I'll see you next week. Bye!